And let me say, I'm so grateful on Senior Center that Kathleen is willing to present to us today. She has a reputation going back many years of gardener supply. I don't want to say many years, a few years, right? We don't, but we're founding Gardener Supply. She has her own business now as a communications person, as I understand, and works for, and I forget the name of the gardening group that you work for still.
It's Longfield Gardens. It's a Dutch bulb importer.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Kathleen. I'm going to ask everyone to mute if you would, please. And at the end of the program, we should have about 15 minutes for questions. There is a little symbol that you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question at the end of the time, or there's also the chat room that you can write questions in that we will monitor. So before we begin, would you please mute your microphone? Does anybody have any problems figuring out how to do that? Phew, I'm so glad, because I'm not sure if I can tell you. So anyway, thank you, Kathleen. It's all yours.
All right. I'm a little, let's see if I can figure this out here. All right. Now, the way I'm set up, I can't see you anymore because I can't figure out how to see you and do this at the same time. So we're just going to go through this, which I actually started on the wrong slide. So everybody can see this okay? I thought I just would give you a little walk through my garden today. We can all use some color and hope that these guys are indeed under the snow. So let me just run through. I've been in my garden here in Richmond for, I don't know, 35, 36 years. And over the years, because I've always worked in gardening, I've had access to a lot of bulbs and other plants. And my garden now includes a ton of different bulbs. And I thought I just would run through the ones that bloom at my house. And you might see some that you don't have. And I'll tell you a little bit about the different ones as we go through. But the idea is that this shows a little time chart of from the early bloomers to the mid-season to the late bloomers. And that's kind of how I've organized the presentation today. So we'll start with the earliest guys, snowdrops. And what I wanted to say about these is that I tried for many years, I don't know about you guys, but to start them from bulbs planted in the fall, which you can buy many places. I never had any luck. And about 10 years ago, a friend of mine gave me a pot of snowdrops that he had dug up in his garden. And from those, I've created thousands around the yard. In England, the only way that they really plant snowdrops is in the green. And that means that you buy them as plants that are either about to bloom or have just bloomed, and you plant them that way. So if you've tried growing snowdrops before and have not had luck, try to find someone. I'll throw my name in the ring as someone you could come over and get some from. And that has really been the secret to success at my house anyway. They like kind of woodland edges. They'll take more shade than most bulbs. And they're just the cheeriest things ever. Last spring, because it was so cold for so long, they were in bloom for, I don't know, 3 weeks or more. They're also a really good bee plant. And you'll find that they're just completely covered with bees when they're blooming. Oh, I threw in a little video. So there's, each clump, if you can imagine, I have 100 clumps like this. Every clump is just packed with bees. We do have a beekeeper who lives down the road. All right, the next group are snowdrops, and there's two kinds of snowdrops, snow crocus or species crocus. These are a little bit smaller than the other ones, which are called giant crocus. They have some different colors that are available. The flowers are a little smaller, and they bloom about a week earlier, a little shorter too. These are the giant crocus. They come in purple, yellow, white, and then this wonderful pickwick, the striped ones. I have these around the yard in different places. I've put them in the lawn, which you see here. And the only problem I have with crocuses is chipmunks who seem to just love the bulbs. And even after, they don't dig them up until June, and I figure they must be able to smell the bulbs because all the foliage is gone by then, but they'll go through the yard and it just looks like, someone's come there and just shot up the yard because there's holes everywhere. So I plant more crocus every fall in hopes that I get some at least in the spring. They don't dig them up every year, but it's just kind of unpredictable. The next bulb, which I totally love, is Shinodoxa, commonly called Glory of the Snow. This is the sweetest little bulb if you don't have this. Blooms right after the crocus, naturalizes very easily from offsets. It also produces seeds, and the seeds have a sweet coating on them. And like some other plants, the ants are attracted to this coating and will carry the seeds a ways away, and you'll find them coming up in various places around your yard, thanks to the ants. They come in this wonderful sky blue, which is my favorite, and then they also come in white and kind of a lavender pink color. This was taken last spring when we had that crazy late snow, or one of the late snows. So they're very cold tolerant, as all these early spring bulbs are, fortunately for us. This is Pushkinia, also called striped squill. This is another of my favorites. It's not really naturalized here. I plant a few bulbs every couple of years. I don't know why it doesn't persist, but it's just the cutest thing ever, I think. And it has a wonderful little fragrance, kind of like violets or something, and is probably the first flower that I cut and bring inside and put in a little vase. Just a really great bulb if you can get your hands on it. You probably have to mail order these. They're usually not at a retail store. There's just not enough demand for them. And I think if they had a better name instead of Pushkinia, they probably would be more popular. Scilla iberica. This is the wonderful cobalt blue flowers that create big carpets in lawns and gardens. This is a good bulb to put just virtually anywhere. The foliage is really grassy and it disappears very quickly, so you don't have this problem with foliage hanging around, because as you know, with spring bulbs, you need to let that foliage stay until it turns yellow and withers. Otherwise, the bulb won't have enough energy to produce another year of flowers. So this is one of the bulbs, and the ones before this, all these tiny ones, the foliage goes away really quickly. And these also get spread by ants, and I have them in the lawn as well, which you see here is a clump in the lawn. These also you can pick and put in a little vase. So they're super cute favorites. Then we'll go on to daffodils. This is my yard, believe it or not. So I used to, when I first started the garden here, I put lots of daffodils into the flower beds. And over the years, I've dug almost all of them out because the clumps of bulbs got so large and the foliage got so messy that it flopped all over all the other perennials and plants that were trying to come up. So I gradually put them into the meadow adjacent to most of the gardens, and this is what's happened. So early blooming daffodils tend to be trumpets. This is what you see here is yellow and white trumpets. And I'll go to those in just a sec. What I've put in the flower beds instead is another early bloomer called tete-a-tete. And these are just about 8 inches tall. So the flowers are smaller, the foliage is finer. And these, so they work in a flower bed. They just don't get big and floppy, and they multiply, but not in a way that's a problem. And let's see what else I was going to say about they are also very heat tolerant. So they bloom really early, but they last for weeks. So if you don't have tete-a-tete, I highly recommend it. This is the double tete-a-tete, which is so cute. Again, the same height and size, a little harder to find, but really sweet. It has this kind of little bit of a green tint to the flowers. So we'll go back to the trumpet daffodils, these really early bloomers. Ice Follies is one of the earliest and has this kind of yellow center. And the other is the yellow version of the trumpets. Dutch Master, Yellow River, all the yellow trumpets are kind of pretty similar. And as I said earlier, they're all good naturalizers. So if you really, what you want is just to carpet a bank with daffodils, go for trumpets. A lot of the naturalizing mixes will include mostly trumpets because they multiply very readily and you get a big show of color really fast. Next is hyacinths. Not everybody grows hyacinths. I don't know why, because I think they're just so wonderful. They have the best fragrance. And I always plant extras to cut and bring inside. They also can be forced. I've had some luck with forcing and some not luck with forcing. But I find they come back at least 2 years. You want to, like all these bulbs, the more well-drained the soil is, the better luck you'll have in terms of the perennial nature of the flowers. Most bulbs are from kind of alpine-ish kind of soils that are thin and well-drained, where they get, it's cold winters, but the summers tend to be hot and dry. And so as we know, our summers are usually, well, last summer was hot and dry, but usually we have a lot of moisture in the soil, both in the winter and the summer, and bulbs don't really like that. And that's the reason why many bulbs are not perennial for us. You'll find people in like where it's dry, say California or New Mexico or something, will have tulips come back every year for 10 years. Whereas here, we can't really count on that with tulips, or the same is true for hyacinths. So I usually get 2 years out of them. There are lots of colors, and encourage you to try them all. They're all great. And again, a really great flower to cut and bring inside. You can, if you want, pull up, because I plant them often, replant them every year. You can also dig up the plant and bring it inside that way too. This is one of the successful years I had in forcing them. I've done it in a neighbor's cold cellar. That's what worked the best. But you could try a second refrigerator or something like that. But they are pretty great as forced flowers. Next are muscari, or grape hyacinths. Again, there's a bunch of different kinds. These are really sweet to cut and bring inside too. They last a long time. They bloom from the bottom up. Bees love them. And this is Blue Magic. There's also Valerie Finis, which is this powder blue color that's really great. And then Armeniacum is the most common one that if you just go to the nursery and you look for grape hyacinths, this is the kind. These are the ones you'll get. Last year I tried for the first time these white ones called Siberian Tiger. And then another super cute one is Ocean Magic, which has is kind of a two-tone. So these last a couple weeks. Again, the foliage goes away pretty quickly. You see in the back of the Ocean Magic on the right, there's that little double tete-a-tete. So they're shorter than even the shortest daffodils, but a really nice spring bulb to include in your garden. We'll go on to mid-season daffodils. There's tons of them, many colors, flower styles, and heights. This is a especially cute one. Thalia is this beautiful, like white butterflies. Golden Echo is a really strong one. It has that, it looks like kind of a yellow shadow on the petals, the Echo. And that's a really good one too. That's a mid-height. Other mid-season ones, Jetfire on the left, just a real cutie, and Kedron, which has these kind of salmon yellow petals around a orange disc. There also are dwarf daffodils. Some are really short, like I said, with tete-a-tete, and some to have these little cute little flowers. the one on the left is Cheerfulness, and that's a really sweetly scented one with multiple flowers per stem. And the one on the right has one flower per stem, but these cute little flowers. And that sundisk blooms very late in the season and has very grassy, super narrow foliage. So again, it's a good one if you want to have it in a flower bed. It won't flop all over. It's really the trumpets that you want to keep out of your flower beds, which I wish I knew at the beginning. And double daffodils are also super fabulous. Tahiti, and then a really pretty one, Delna. These are such good cut flowers. One thing about daffodils, they do have that clear sap in the stem. If you want to put them in a vase, what I recommend is cut them, bring them inside, put them in just some cool water for about a half an hour or an hour, and let some of that sap drain out. Pour the water out, and then put them in a vase. And at that point, you can arrange them with tulips and other kinds of branches or whatever you want to put them in. You just need to get rid of some of that sap, which has kind of it tends to clog up the openings for the other plants, and so they have a hard time taking up water. So drain out some of that sap, and then you're good to go. More daffodils, sorry. Some little late sweet miniatures, Baby Boomer, and Minnow, another super cute ones. And these are the very latest ones that I have. This is Mary Copeland, and then on the left is a really ancient daffodil. Doesn't have a common name. It was gifted to me when I first moved to Richmond, and it has a gardenia scent. I'm telling you this because you can look for it. It is available out there, and blooms Memorial Day weekend. And the only problem with it is that sometimes, some years, if it gets too hot, the buds dry out before the flower opens. They blast, it's called. So some years you won't get these, but the years that you do, it's really worth it. So if you can get your hands on Plenus odoratus, I highly recommend it. Now we're on to the real color. So this is on the right is my flower garden a few years ago. I used to plant a lot of tulips in the beds, and as you'll see a little later, I now plant most of them in the vegetable garden. Partly it's just so much easier. It takes a lot of time to put all these bulbs in between the other plants, especially when there are a multitude of other things under the ground, and that you dig up a spot to plant some tulips, and up comes, daffodils and all these other kinds of things, and you just create more problems. So now I put them in the vegetable garden, but they do look beautiful in the flower garden like this. And I'll just go through a few of the different kinds of tulips, because from early to late bloomers, again, you can get a month to 6 weeks worth of flowers, depending on what kinds of tulips you choose. This is double early tulips are about the first to bloom, at least at my house. This is a favorite, Monty Orange. The doubles tend to be shorter than most tulips, maybe 12 to 18 inches tall. Really great cut flowers, and they change a lot. All tulips continue to grow as they open. So they'll open, the flower will be kind of medium sized, and then over the course of a week or 10 days, the flower gets larger, the stem gets longer. So tulips are kind of unique in that way, and if you buy them at the store, you'll probably notice that by the time you're about ready to toss them, they're like 6 inches longer than they were when you bought them. And florists take this into account when they're arranging with tulips. They put the tulip really deep in the arrangement because they know that the stem's going to elongate and the flower is going to get larger. So it's fun to watch these guys develop. This is a really very pretty one, Foxy Foxtrot. Other kinds of early blooming tulips are the emperor tulips, also called Fosteriana tulips. On the left is orange emperor, one of my favorites. It has that green on the outer petal, which I really like. And these flowers get really large. They're they get really, they're tall and really big. Not the flowers are tall, the stems are not that tall. And Greggy eyes are shorter. The flowers are smaller, but they have this kind of lily shape to the leaves that I think is really, really beautiful. Viridiflora tulips are the tulips that have green on them. On the left is Exotic Emperor. That's an early blooming one. Just fabulous tulip, gets really big and changes every single day. Artist is also a changer. It opens up usually a little more orange than this, and as the flowers age, they become kind of this pinkish tan. It's really cool. And then Flaming Spring Green has those red flecks in it. That's a taller one, but green tulips, if you haven't grown them, really great. Here's how I grow most of my tulips now in the vegetable garden. It takes me a couple hours to plant all these. I put tarps down on the walking path, dig the soil out of the bed, onto the tarp, lay all the tulips in, put all the soil back in, and call it good. So it saves a lot of time, and most of the tulips I grow, I'm growing for photography, so it's all I really need to do is take pictures of them. But I've also dug them up sometimes when they're just coming up and put them into the flower beds that way. But it's just a quicker way to deal with it. The same with the hyacinths, which you see behind there. I've done the same thing, dig them up and put them in. It's just like you're putting a potted plant that you buy at the nursery into your garden, same thing. So that is my current way I do it. Mid-season tulips, Darwin hybrids you've probably heard of these. These are the biggest and burliest tulips that we have to plant. They come in really bright colors. If you want to have tulips that, your neighbors notice, these are the ones to go for. They're tall, the flowers are big, the colors are bright. Here's two popular varieties. Really, they're very beautiful. Next to bloom, or really almost at the same time, are Triumph tulips. These flowers are not quite as large as the Darwin hybrids, but they come in way more colors. And if you're into just creating new color combinations every year, you're probably going to want to plant Triumphs because there's just so many more colors available. They're, mid-height, probably 24 to 30 inches, something like that. Really great for cutting, of course. Lots to choose from. Lots of beautiful colors. Here are a couple other kinds of tulips. Grand Perfection is a Rembrandt tulip. And so in the old 1500s in Holland, there were the tulip mania thing had happened, which was actually a virus that was in the tulips that made the color break like this. Now the tulips are no longer virused, but the breeders have bred for this same kind of characteristic. And if you look for Rembrandt tulips, you'll see these kind of neat flames that are on the petals, like on Grand Perfection. Parrots, amazing, beautiful for flower arrangements. I have not had a ton of luck with them, and I've grown the white and the black. They are just a little more fiddly than most tulips, so I'd say just don't have your hopes too high if you plant parrots. If you really want to be sure you get a great show of color, Darwin hybrids are the way to go. This is a fringe tulip lambada, another really nice one. And then the last tulips to bloom are almost the last are single lates. These are sometimes called cottage tulips. They're the tallest. They're probably 36 inches tall. Nice big flowers. They're pretty heat resistant. These are the tulips that they'll plant down in the Carolinas and Washington D.C. and stuff because they'll really take the heat. And so these springs when we're having really hot weather, this is a good reason to plant these single late tulips. Blushing Beauty, Queen of Night, beautiful. The flowers are a little smaller than most of the other single-lates on Queen of Night, but the color is really incredible. A couple others are Menton and World Expression. Great tulips. And closing out the tulip season are the double-lates. And here's a couple of them. Like the double earlies, they're a little shorter than most tulips, but they really, the flowers are huge. They'll fill your whole hand once they're mature. So they'll start out smaller, don't be concerned, but over the course of a week or 10 days, they really get bigger, and they just keep getting more and more amazing and beautiful. So highly recommend double-lates. And for cutting, if you like to make bouquets, you can't beat them. And last, the allium land here. I've become a real fan of alliums, and as you can see, these are pictures from my garden. I have a lot of alliums. And I guess there's a bunch of different reasons. One, pests don't bother them, deer don't bother them, or rodents. Many of them are perennial, and they also bloom at a time when the tulips are fading, but the peonies haven't started and the iris haven't started yet. So they fill a bloom time gap in the year when you're outside and you just feel like you should have flowers by now. And fortunately, there are alliums to fill that gap. Purple Sensation are the first to bloom. They're about 2.5 feet tall. They are very perennial, at least for me. They naturalize, so I didn't plant this many that you see in the picture. They have multiplied. And honestly, in this bed, this is one of my perennial beds. Last year, I dug out most of them, about probably 2/3 of the bulbs, and I put them in the meadow along with the daffodils because, like most alliums, their foliage tends to start yellowing just as the flowers reach their peak. So it's not a great look, and the foliage is there's more of it than with a daffodil or a tulip, and it just flops all over everything. So I just got tired of it looking kind of messy. If you kept your eyes at this level where the photo's taken of it, it looked great. But if you stood back and you looked at the bed, there's a bunch of dead yellow foliage. So if you're going to plant Purple Sensation, which is a good one because the bulbs are much less expensive than most of the other ornamental alliums, just put it in a place where you're going to be okay with the foliage not looking great. So there's other things to maybe cover it up. This is a really sweet little allium that I have in my rock garden, Allium carataviense. I think it's the foliage, I think, is as beautiful as the flowers, maybe even prettier. It's this really beautiful blue when it first comes out with pink edges on the leaves. And then the flowers kind of look like a dandelion in a way. But these are really a nice little guy. And then we get to the big-headed alliums. His excellency is the flowers are maybe 5 inches across, and the stems are about 3 to 4 feet tall. So they have a big, bold presence in the garden, really exciting, I think. Alliums, all of the alliums are really attractive to bees and butterflies, and another reason to like them. There's a little bee on that one. This is Globemaster. That's the really big one. These are almost as big as a bowling ball when they get full size. And they're the latest blooming ones. All of the alliums, I tend to leave them in the garden, not the Purple Sensation, but these big-headed ones, I think that the seed heads look as cool as the flowers when they're in bloom. So I tend to leave them in the garden for a long time. You can also pick them, hang them upside down, dry them, and spray them with a fixative or with a colored spray paint, silver, gold, something, and keep them inside. They last for at least for a full year. This is another allium that I highly recommend, Allium bulgaricum. It goes by a variety of different names. It's one of those plants that they've reclassified a lot of times. But if you look for it under this, you'll probably find it. It's also called Sicilian honey garlic. And unlike the other alliums, this one actually does smell a lot like garlic or onions. But I wouldn't hold it against it. This is just a super cool plant. Very perennial here in Richmond. It comes back reliably and multiplies for me. It has a little bit of a wonky nature. The stems don't stand straight up like the other guys do. They sometimes lean left or right. So just be prepared for that. But the bees really love this one, and I just think they're super cool. When they first open, the flowers hang down, and then once the flowers are pollinated, I wish I had a time lapse, but they raise up and point straight up. And so when the seeds are formed, the flowers are standing straight up. It's worth getting to watch that. Allium nigrum, just a smaller flower head, but very charming, a little later blooming. These are, I'm showing you in order of bloom time too. So this is another little bit of a later one. Allium Christophii, another one that I love, and you can see it there, just the seed heads in the garden. That's probably early August, and I just think they look cool. The flower heads are about probably 8 or 9 inches across, and about a foot tall. Allium Christophii. And the last of the alliums, this is drumstick allium, and a new one on the far left there called forelock, which I grew for the first time last year. That has really stiff, tall stems. It was 4 feet tall. Whereas the drumstick alliums, again, they're a little bit wonky. They kind of list left and right, and I have them planted in this lavender hedge that I have. I think they'd also be good in like with ornamental grasses or something, but you have to kind of be okay about the fact that they're not going to be that orderly. They bloom from the top down, and at first they have this cool bicolor with the green on the bottom and the raspberry on top. So another really great allium. And then I'll just end with a couple pictures of from the garden last year, I think. And like I said, these are all daffodils that came out of my flower beds, and over 30 years, they've just continued to multiply. This is probably 25% of the ones that I have, maybe. Here's that little muscari, the grape hyacinth, Valeria finis in the rock garden. A good place to put muscari, just to show you that even if you don't have a very large space, you can put a dozen bulbs and have a nice little burst of color. Here's the garden from a different view, showing, you can see in the front some of the hyacinths that I have along the bed, and there are still some daffodils in there, but most of the daffodils have been moved into the other garden. And just another shot of what it often looks like in my vegetable garden. Because I pull all these out, by the time I'm ready to put in tomatoes and peppers, the tulips are done. So there's no competition. It's a little hard to pull the bulbs and just toss them, but that's what I do. And then here's that bed of alliums. So I'm going to try to get out of this and take your questions. There you are. Are you there, Martha?
I am. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Can we all come and visit your place? Can we all?
Sure. Yeah, wear your mask and, all that kind of stuff. But maybe, I guess we're all probably, there's a lot of gray hair here. But hopefully we'll all be vaccinated by the time spring comes.
Yes.
And then we can all come and hang out. Yeah.
That'd be fabulous. So questions, you can either write them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you. And if you don't know how to use the chat, anybody got a question here?
There's Lorraine.
No, let's see. We got a hand up here. Yes, Lorraine. You need to unmute. We get you all muted and then we say unmute.
I think I've unmuted.
You
Uh,
did.
Beautiful bulbs. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
If you're not pulling your tulips, how long can we expect them to be blooming? A few years?
Well, the ones that are the most reliable to return are the Darwin hybrids. And you could get 2-3 years depending. It all depends on how well drained the soil is. So if you have a place where the soil is really, I mean, I don't know if this exists in Richmond, but the soil is well drained, put them there. You want to, ideally, they're going to get, the soil is warm in the summer and they getting some sun on it. So just keep them out of a heavy soil that tends to be wet. What happens to the tulips, the reason they don't come back is that the bulbs, they split. So if you dig up a tulip bulb in the spring, you'll be able to know whether it's going to bloom again. Because if it's split in 2 or 3 pieces, none of those pieces is going to have enough energy to produce another flower. You need to have a bulb that stays entire. And if you can manage that, then you will get flowers the next year. Some of the species tulips, the little guys, I've heard people have good luck with those coming back. I haven't grown those myself. But I would try with the Darwin hybrids, and again, just put them in the best place you can. And what'll happen the second year is you'll probably get smaller flowers, and you might just get foliage. And if you dig up the bulb, you can people are always a lot of times nervous about digging up bulbs, but you learn an awful lot when you dig up a bulb because you can really tell what's going on. And if the bulb has split, that's the reason, is that it just doesn't have enough energy to produce another flower.
Okay.
So if you want to guarantee it, you got to plant them every year. But if you have a good spot, you might be lucky and have them come back 2, 3. I've heard of people 5 years, it just depends.
Kathleen, could you stop sharing your screen so the MMC TV could have a better shot of everybody? There you go. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. And if you want to just see Kathleen, you can just put your cursor on there and put a pin on her, and there she is just by herself, but you don't have to do that. Okay, we have a couple questions in the chat. This is not a bulb question, but Tim wants to know what kind of lavender works for you?
The lavender you see there, much of it was started from seed many years ago, and I think it was Munstead, although I'm not 100% sure. That's one of the hardier ones. And so those have been there for 25, 30 years. And every year there's kind of one that I dig out and I replace. And I've found that Paquette's has a really nice selection of lavender that are field grown. And I'll often go down and replace, one of the ones that I have to dig out with one from down there, because it's not like they're the little plants that you get, in a little 4-inch pot. They usually have them in a gallon pot. They're big. You might pay $15, but it's a big lavender, and they have hardy ones because they've overwintered themselves. So Munstead is good. That's the only name I can think of right now. But I have, like I said, I've grown them from seed. And if you want to start a little hedge of yourself, it's an inexpensive way to do it. It takes a couple of years because they grow very slowly. But you can start them under lights, pot them up, and might even put them in a nursery area for a year or 2 until they get bigger. And then that's what I did, because I have 20 plants, and to buy that many was not something I was willing to do.
Jeanette, you want to unmute and fire your question?
Sure. I have a beginner question. What do you do to prepare the soil? I think many of us have glacial till here. Is there something?
Here too. Yeah. The garden that you saw, the sort of raised garden there in front of my house, that was subsoil dug out when we putting the foundation for the house. So talk about glacial till, it was the most inert material ever. And so all these years I've been just adding compost every single year. I usually have 5 yards of compost, 6 delivered every spring. It costs a bunch. It costs like $400 because you got to pay for the compost and you got to have someone deliver it. But gardening's, I don't have a lot of other vices, so that's what I do is I spend my money on compost. And that's what I'd say is, keep your shredded leaves, try, make as much compost as you can. I just can't make enough, so I buy it and just continue to dig it into the soil, loosen the soil get a good, I swear by a garden fork as opposed to a spade, because you can really get it in when you have rocky soil like we have here, and loosen up the soil, work in the compost, shredded leaves, whatever organic matter you can find, and just keep doing it every single year. And it's hard work, but that's really the only way to build humus in the soil, is to be adding organic matter. And we just don't have it much in our soils. So I would say loosen the soil, because you want to get through that hard pan or whatever awful stuff you have, and work that organic matter down into the soil as best you can. If it's wet where you are, whatever you can do to kind of get the water away, raised beds is a good solution, because it's sort of an easy way to be sure that you're going to get well-drained soil. You can also put better soil and compost into a raised bed. So you saw the beds in my vegetable garden, they're all raised about 6 inches or so. They don't have wooden sides or anything, but does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much.
Good. It's worth it. It just takes time.
Denise, you have a question? Denise Dean?
Yeah, I do. Thanks. So I definitely have daffodil envy, Kathleen. I feel like it's amazing. Your gardens are beautiful. I feel like I put daffodils in every year.
Yeah.
I buy good quality daffodils. I get them from Gardeners or Breck's or something. It's not like I'm buying them from Home Depot. But they just never really seem to naturalize a lot. I never really seem to get a lot more of them.
Is it a sunny place that you have them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sunny, I have a pretty shady lot, but I put them in the few sunny places I have.
Yeah. That's strange, because I just have the opposite. I just can't get, I have bulbs that I dig out of every time I put a shovel in the ground, up comes daffodil bulbs pretty much at this point everywhere.
Wow.
And so I just pile them up over by my driveway, and sometimes
well, let me know when you do that. And
okay, I will. I should put that on Front Porch Forum. But there's been years where I have just, no one's come to get them, and they just go through the winter lying outside.
Wow.
Without being buried, and in the spring they grow. I mean, it's just like, so I think that not all daffodils are perennial, at least for me. Like I said, the trumpets are in the naturalizing mixes, which usually include a lot of trumpets, are the ones that are most perennial and will mostly multiply. Okay. The ones like I showed, the pretty that like the doubles and some of the miniatures and stuff like that, you can't necessarily count on those to multiply. But usually they come back. Yours don't even come back.
They do come back. It's just, considering I've planted so many over the years, I just thought my yard would start to look like yours, or a small piece of it.
Yeah, right.
And it really doesn't. I just feel like they're never really multiplying as much as I would expect them to.
I'll tell you what, it might be kind of like my experience with snowdrops. You just need to get some daffodils from someone who lives nearby and just put in a whole bunch, and then maybe you'll be in business. So
okay, I'll keep trying.
Find out where I live and come and see me. Okay,
so you don't fertilize them or anything, or add
No.
Okay. Right.
And I have them like there's some really soggy parts where there's a cut where we made this path down to the river, and water just kind of seeps out of there. There's daffodils in there. They're out by the road. I pitch daffodils, like if I dig them out and I don't have time to deal with them, I'll just throw them over the bank. Now the whole back of the bank, they plant themselves. So if you lay them, like sometimes I just don't feel like planting them, and you can throw them into the field and they actually root and pull themselves down into the soil.
Wow.
So they're amazing. Okay. So come and get some. Yeah.
I'll keep trying. Thanks.
I'm happy to share with you.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat, and is this Jeannie Deslitz? I'm assuming it's Jeannie rather than Ray. You said that you toss them all out and toss, so do you have to purchase new ones every year? Now, I'm not sure what bulb we're talking about here.
Probably the tulips, because everyone's really aghast that I throw those out. And I have to say, it's not easy. But because I work for this bulb company and my job is to take photos of bulbs, they send me free bulbs. So I don't pay for those bulbs. And I always have to have new ones every year that I'm going to photograph. So I do pitch them. So the chances are that you aren't going to probably want to invest in 500 tulips every fall. But you might want to invest in 100. I mean, you could probably get 100 for $40, maybe even 200. And if you think of what you pay for tulips at the store, it's a lot of pleasure. You get to see all the weeks of seeing them come up, and then they're in bud, and then they're flowering, and it's a whole experience. So I throw them out, and I do replant them every fall.
That's amazing. Any other questions? I have a question if anyone else in the group wants to raise their hand for a question. Okay. My question is, how much time do you spend on your gardening?
I don't know. If I ever added it up, I wouldn't do it. I don't know. I mean, you could ask my kids who are now grown and gone. They would probably give you the real truth, because there's lots of things I didn't do with them because I was in my garden. But my garden is my happy place, and I don't know. I moved to Vermont when I was 19, and the reason I moved was to have a vegetable garden and a flower garden and be able to be a gardener. And so it's my calling. It's what I do. And so I'd say when the kids were little, I used to get up, and I had a full-time job in Burlington. I would get up, an hour early, like as soon as it was dawn. I'd go out and work for an hour in the garden, and then I'd come home and I'd also work at night an hour every day. So 2 hours a day that way, and then every weekend. Now the garden is much easier because I've replaced a lot of the perennials with shrubs over the years. And I'd say, it's really a full weekend day. But I don't really keep track of it because I just like being out there. But it is, I'm not someone who, if we had a boat and I like to go boating, that'd be a problem. It takes a lot of time. Yeah.
Remarkable. I'm so interested in how did you develop this? Where did this come from that you wanted to move to Vermont and have flowers and vegetables?
I think some of it is hereditary. My grandfather was a gardener, and my grandmother, and my other grandfather had a big vegetable garden. So I think we didn't have any gardens growing up. So I think it must have been, and I was not exposed to gardens ever because we lived in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and there was nobody had a garden that I knew. But I just, it was the early 70s, and, I wanted to grow my own food and all that stuff, which I'd heard of, but I had no idea how that would ever work. So, and I read Helen and Scott Nearing's books, and they were in Vermont, and I met someone whose grandparents lived in Vermont, and I remember him telling me about what it was like to visit his grandparents every summer. And I thought, it was such a fantasy land. I just thought, is there really a place like this? If there is, I'm going there. And so I did. I hitchhiked by myself, and then I came here, and that's what happened. So I've been here ever since. Yeah.
Have you written your memoirs?
No, you just heard them. They're pretty short.
No, you hitchhiked from Minneapolis to Vermont?
Yeah. People did that then. I mean, it's how people got around. I didn't have any money. I don't know. It wasn't that weird then. I wouldn't want to do it now, and I wouldn't want my kids to do it or my grandkids, but
that's what you do.
I'm glad that you could do it then, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to come. It was a better, safer times then.
And how did you learn? Did you take classes? Did you go to gardening school? Did you?
Pretty much learning. I went to UVM and I took a couple kind of plant type classes there. I was an environmental studies major, but most of the plant stuff at UVM at that time in the late 70s was most of the agriculture things was dairy. There was really not the kind of cool stuff that they have now for people who go to UVM about, growing food and flowers and all that kind of stuff. So, it was pretty books and friends and just trial and error. It's been a long time. I mean, you're not seeing all the stuff that went over the bank, twice, 5 times as much stuff died,
Other questions? Anybody want to make a comment or share your own gardening stories or questions?
I'd be happy to, maybe if you get back in touch, Martha, in the summertime, if we can all be out and about safely, I'd be happy to invite people over someday.
That would be wonderful.
I mean, I've had lots of garden tours here in the years past. I haven't done it for a while, just for no reason, but it's always fun to share the garden.
That would be wonderful. And next Friday, same time, same place, Kathleen will be sharing her experiences with summer bulbs. And then after that, we will have her final program on dahlias. I can't imagine a program on dahlias. So I'm just waiting to hear what we can learn about dahlias. So thank you very much. And if anyone has any comments about vegetables, we're going to do another series on vegetables. So if you want to have questions, we don't even know what we're going to do. We've got Paul Feenan, who works at High Mowing, do you know Paul?
Not personally, but I know he knows a lot about vegetables.
So he'll be helping us with that. So if anybody has anything that they specifically want to know about vegetable growing, let me know. And thank you, Kathleen. I look forward.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed some color today.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Fabulous.
Kathleen.
All right, see you next week if you